Good evening, church. It's nice to start the Sabbath out knowing that we're here for one thing, and that's for studying God's Word. I am here tonight because a lot of people know who I am or know of me, but they don't know my story. And I spoke with Brother Jerry Tamayo a few weeks ago and said, I'd like to do my testimony so people can know where I came from. And I'm actually a very humbled man because I never figured that I would be here. And tonight I want the Edinburg Church to know who I am. And tonight I'm going to talk about things that I'm not proud of. And get this thing straight here. And things that still bring me to my knees. So I'm going to do everything I can to hold myself together. I want to thank Pastor Rosales and the elders, and of course my wife. Of course, my wife is the one that introduced me to the church, and without that, I would have never known the truth, and there's no telling where I would have been. And you'll know why after I finish my story. So for the next 3 hours, no, I'm just kidding. It could be 3 hours, but I've shortened it down. Next 30, 40 minutes. I'm doing this not for self-gratification, but I feel like my story needs to be told. I think everybody that has a story needs to be told. Now, if you've heard other testimonials from like Pastor Mark, maybe Pastor Doug Batchelor, and even our own brother Andrew Yu, my story may not be as interesting, but sometimes it just depends on where you're coming from. But I feel like it's something that needs to be told. I used to be a broken person. I mean, I was really broken. But now I just consider, and I think we all are, I just consider myself under construction. Because I believe we all are under construction. We're trying to improve every day. Also, I'd like to, I know he's not here, hopefully he's watching online. I'd like to thank Jerry Tamayo. He put my wife and I through a reset with our bodies, and I lost 35 pounds, feel a lot better. My wife lost about 15 pounds, and we just started doing things differently, so I'd like to thank him publicly for that. And of course, God had a hand in it too. Also, I'd like to say something a lot of people don't know about Brother Andrew Yu. Brother Andrew, you and I are in the same industry. We're competitors. And when I first started coming to this church, there were situations because of what was happening between our companies. And we finally just had to go to Matthew 18. It's something that we should do within the church. You've got a problem, go to Matthew 18. We're now both elders. We probably text more than we ever have. And we were in constant contact with our 40 days and nights of prayer. Amen. So it is a miracle. God can work miracles that he can even make competitors work together, especially because at this point we're not competitors, we're brothers in Christ. So I just wanted to point that out because Andrew has been a big help to me. And I will say that I'm very proud to call myself an Adventist, but there's one thing that I don't like, and that is we don't need to be so self-righteous. I see that all the time. You can bring somebody into this church, get them to join this church, but if you, as an Adventist, if you don't have the love of Jesus in you, it doesn't matter. So why are we pushing so hard for somebody to be an Adventist when they've got to have the love of Jesus first? So, but I am very proud to call myself an Adventist, even though I get left out of certain groups. Certain people know I don't do certain things, drink, whatever the case may be, and I don't get invited. But you know, that's fine because I've got better things and better places to be. I wanted to start out real quick with a joke that someone sent me. And it goes like this: I was shocked, confused, bewildered as I entered heaven's door, not by the beauty of it all, not the lights nor the decor, but it was the folks in heaven who made me sputter and gasp: the thieves, the liars, the sinners, the alcoholics, and the trash. There stood the kid from 7th grade who swiped my lunch money twice. Next to him was my old neighbor who never said anything nice. Bob, who I always thought was rotting away in hell, was sitting pretty on cloud 9, looking incredibly well. I nudged Jesus. What's the deal? I would love to hear your take. How did all these sinners get up here? God must have made a mistake. And why is everyone so quiet, so somber? Give me a clue. Jesus says, hush, child, he said. They're all in shock. No one thought they'd be seeing you. So we cannot judge. It says, judge not. Remember, just going to church doesn't make you a Christian any more than standing in your garage makes you a car. Every saint has a past. Every sinner has a future. Now it's your turn. Life without God is like an unsharpened pencil. It has no point. So hopefully you got a little humor. We do have the pictures. I wasn't free. We're going to go down memory lane real quick. I don't have the clicker, so this is part of my past here. I was when I was with the radio station, we had a Halloween party, and I dressed up as Batman because I always liked Batman. Batman was my hero back then. Martha and we were at some restaurant. They made us wear, what do they call it? Komodos. And so I just want to throw that. This was when I was in Miami at the radio station. I won a contest with Florida Marlins, got to go on field, throw some balls, stuff like that. So that was my younger years. Next slide, please. Unless that's the last one. Did they? Okay. Can we start at the beginning? I didn't realize it was up there. There I am right there. That's my rock and roll style. I was planning on being a rock and roll singer. I'm serious. And so and my hair was that long. I don't think it ever had been that long, but I let it grow. There I am in a play. I did a lot of plays in high school and college. And then the next one, there I am in an ensemble band there in college. I was wild and crazy back then because all I did was drink and thought music, girls, and sports was the only thing that really existed. I did not have God in me. There I am with you probably know the gentleman or the name of the group called Survivor, the one that did Eye of the Tiger, Burning Heart, Search is Over. I got to know him very well during my radio days, and I got a picture with him, and my hair is all messed up because it had rained during the concert. So I got to, but I did get my pictures, and we became real good friends, and I'll tell a little bit more about him a little bit later. There I am during my high school football days. I was number 80. I was a receiver, and I got disappointed when I didn't get a scholarship for football, and I decided it was time to do something else, and that's when I decided I'm going to be a rock and roller. There I was, I don't know, it was maybe 3 or 4 there in that picture. And I think that's the last, well, no, there may be 2 more. That's when I was in a 3-piece suit. Now, my mother would always tell Martha I love to dress up. I think my parents put me in that 3-piece suit. I didn't do that on my own. I was too young, even though they still swear them down, you know. And then I think there's one more picture with the base, or is that it? Okay, that's it? Okay. There was supposed to be a baseball picture in there, but anyway, I was a coach for a Little League team. So anyway, I just wanted to show you that kind of fun, kind of show you exactly what I kind of, I guess, looked like back then. I was pretty wild and crazy. It just, and those are tame pictures too. So, my family, we were a middle-class family. My father was in the oil and gas business. He became a very successful oil and gas man. He even had the chance to become like a Jerry Jones type of the Dallas Cowboys. He was asked to go into partnership with a professional football team, and things happened, and my dad didn't like the way it was going, and he backed out because my dad he was very honest, and he had integrity. And if he didn't like the way certain things went, he would just back off from whatever project he was involved with. My mother, she was a housewife, except for her first 5 years of my life. She did work, but once my dad got promoted and things going well for him, he wanted her to be home and stay with me and my brother. And then, of course, I had a sister that died at birth, I think about 2 days after. Yeah, it was about 2 days after she was born. Her little heart couldn't continue, and it gave out, and she passed away. And then we had my, about 7 years later, had my brother. Now, I want you to understand something. We were not a religious family. We did go to church some, but we were not a religious family. But my father said grace more than any person. And that's because my mother's name was Grace. So he made up for it all those years. My mother and father gave us tough love, and I'm very thankful for that. And I will tell you, I was probably more afraid of my mom than my dad most days. My dad had his moments, and the reason for that, I think my dad, he was a boy himself. He kind of understood, but my mom didn't always understand things, and we would get in trouble, and she would just hound us to death about certain things, and I was like, man, you don't understand, Mom. You don't understand because you're not a boy. But it didn't matter. She pretty much kept us on the straight and narrow. But they were hard-working people and very honest and very caring. Now, when I was born with a double hernia. But God pulled me through from day one of my life. Didn't realize it then, but he had a hand in it. And then the double hernia came back when I was in 6th grade. And while I was in 6th grade, I even caught pneumonia and bronchitis. And all of this was happening in 6th grade. So I was thinking, I'm going to be a sickly child. This is all happening during, of course, because I had never missed school until that year. And I missed about 3 weeks due to the pneumonia and missed about 2 weeks because of the hernia surgery. But it all cleared up. And that was the last time I was ever in a hospital. So thank God for that. Now, I did have my first near-death experience. So I'm very lucky to be here because there's 2 reasons. Number one, I should be dead by now. And number 2 is I'm able to speak, and I'll get more into that here in a minute. But I had my first near-death experience when I was 2 years old, and what happened was I took some sleeping pills. I was a climber. I climbed the cabinets. I did whatever I had to do because I thought that's what little boys did. And I got in the cabinet, and evidently my mother had sleeping pills that, for whatever reason, she had been taking or just started to take. Well, I took all of them for her. I took care of it. I think there was 1 or 2 pills left. And it was very strange because my parents knew I was quiet, very quiet, and they knew that was not like me. And we had company at that time, and they couldn't figure out what was going on. Well, they found me asleep. I was passed out because of all the pills. And because of that, they thought I was playing, and I wasn't. They realized that something was wrong, so they rushed me to the hospital, and luckily, they got me there in time to pump out my stomach, and the doctors did tell them another 5 minutes, and your son would have been gone. Now, with that, and I had already had a situation, but this did something to my brain. Because it caused a speech, it was even worse. It caused a speech impediment problem. Actually, this made it worse by taking the pills. So when I was 6 years old, I started the first grade. I didn't like it. I hated school. I couldn't understand why I had to be there. I couldn't understand why my parents couldn't go with me. You can call me, I guess some people call me a mama's boy. Whatever the case, I wanted my mother and father there with me at school, but it couldn't happen. So because of the speech impediment problem, I had to take what they call a special ed class. Okay? I had to take that 5 days a week. And it was so hard on me because I was made fun as a child. Of course, kids can be so cruel nowadays. Even back then, they called me, they said I was retarded. They said that I was going to a class that for the slow people, I mean, you name it, they told me, whatever the case may be. Whatever name they could come up with, they came up with. And the one word that until this day, I cannot stand is the word retarded. I know there's a place for it in our society, but I guess it did damage to me. So could you imagine as a little kid going home every day from first grade all the way to third grade, almost to fourth grade, every day crying. And my parents were trying to understand how to help me. So I took more speech classes and at school, at home, wherever I could, because no one could understand when I spoke. You can understand what I'm saying now, which is a miracle, because back then I could not. The doctors even told my parents, there's an 85-90% chance that your son will never get over this speech problem. So I'm thinking, okay, well, I could go and flip hamburgers the rest of my life at a McDonald's. I wasn't for sure. But I was so determined to get out of that. And once I did, then things kind of started getting a little bit better for me, because I was picked on as a child. You can imagine not being able to speak properly. It was horrible, but by the grace of God, I am here. Amen. Now, I was a loner for the first 7 years of my life. And I was fine with that because I had imaginary friends. It's just the way I was. But I was alone because of the way people made fun of me. I didn't want to have anything to do with other people. So I was very quiet. In fact, one of the little friends that I had, an imaginary friend, was a fly, and I named him Bill. And one day my mother killed that fly, and she kept hearing me talk about Bill, but she killed the fly, and I found it and picked it up and said, "Poor Bill." So she felt bad about that. So, in Hebrews 13:16 it says, no, I'm sorry, I've got a little ahead of myself. So when I was 7, my little brother was born, and I didn't understand because I had been alone for so long. In fact, I don't even remember my sister when she passed away. So I didn't know anything about brothers and sisters, didn't think I needed one. But my little brother was born, and for whatever reason, I wanted to send him back. I wanted to go back to the hospital because I was not ready to have this little baby interfere in my life and have to share. But in Hebrews 13:16, it says, "Do not neglect to do good and to share what you have, for such sacrifices are pleasing to God." Amen. That wasn't me. I did not want to share. So after about 4 or 5 days of convincing my parents to try to take this little baby back, it wasn't happening, so I got used to him. So you learn to love the little baby. I wanted to take him out and play football. I couldn't do that. I got caught waking him up all the time. So I wasn't the best brother. So eventually I just gave up and said, okay, he's here to stay. So I moved on. So. Now, I do remember going to church since I was about 5 years old. And the first church I went to, was exposed to, was Church of Christ. Now, I don't know if you know anything. I lost my place here. I don't know if you know anything about Church of Christ, but I will tell you that was one of the strangest churches I've ever been to. But that's what my parents believed in. That's what they thought was, out there. So, but this church, they didn't believe you could not wear shorts. There was, they didn't believe in dancing. They didn't believe with instruments in the church. It was all a cappella. They felt like, we did not need instruments in the church. And when we would read scripture, we would just read it, but we didn't really study it. Kind of, you've heard people say, you've been in other churches and people, they don't really study the Bible. They just, it's like baby food. They just take a little taste of it and they don't get the meat of it because they don't, that's it. They think, oh, I've read that verse, I'm good for the day. Also, this church rotated themselves around the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday because it was obviously a Sunday church. And if the Cowboys were going to play at 12 noon, the church would let out about 11:40. So everybody could go grab lunch and watch the Cowboys. And if they played the late game, which church, Sunday night church, with that particular church started at 6 p.m., we wouldn't start till about 6:30 because we would see the rest of the Cowboy game. And I thought that was so strange. Didn't know that much about religion, but I thought, something's not right here. So, but I followed along because everybody else was doing it, so I started doing it because I was into football. But I thought church was a waste of my time. Churches was always a turnoff to me, but my parents made me go, and I hated every single moment of it. I even tried to learn the books of the Bible one time. Didn't happen. I was turned off by it. In Hebrews 10:25, it says, the Bible instructs us to be in a relationship with other believers. I did not care about being in a relationship with other believers. I didn't really care to be in a relationship with anyone because of the way I had been treated. But it all changed in junior high because in junior high, it was all about sports, music, and girls. And my wife knows about the other women, so just in case you were wondering. But we eventually stopped going to church as a family. In fact, when I was 10 years old, I was really getting into the music scene. And I remember a brand new show, and I'm dating myself here, but I remember a brand new show called The Partridge Family. I don't know if anybody remembers that show. If I'm the only one, then I feel really old. But I'm sure everybody's heard of the name David Cassidy. I wanted to be like David Cassidy because he had the women screaming, crying over him. I thought it was just the best thing. And I'm like, music is what I want to do because I can get all the girls. And then when it came to high school, my life was still about the same. It was sports, music, and that's all I thought about. And of course, girls. Girls played a big part of it. I would have a lot of speeches from my dad about girls because he was very concerned about me. But my confidence was coming back because I could speak, I could have a conversation, and I was like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. So I played all types of sports, football, basketball, baseball, track, you name it. I did it. So if there's one sport I probably shouldn't have played, even though I like it to this day, but that was football. And the reason why is because I had a couple of injuries from football that still bother me today. And my mother did not want me to play football. She said I could play any of the other sports, but don't play football. But she was outvoted because me and my dad we both wanted me to play football. He was a quarterback in high school. He wanted me to at least be a quarterback or a receiver. And I was a receiver. Now, I got to play football mainly because I wasn't that big, but I could catch the ball, and I was fast. So if I caught the ball and about 5 or 6 yards in front of you, I'm gone. So that's the reason I got to play football. But I would get up on Saturday mornings after a game, and I'd be beat up. I'd have to go for treatment, had to go watch film. And then most Saturday afternoons have to go to the chiropractor for a treatment. And on the way, it was about 16 miles over there. We'd go to the next town over because he was the best chiropractor around. We would go over there, and she would try to talk to me out of playing football. You could quit tomorrow. There's no, let's just stop. That way we don't have to do all of this. And I never did, and she hated it. Now, she supported me. She'd go to the games, but she would watch. She said every time I'd go down, hit the ground, she would hold her breath because she was afraid that her little boy wouldn't come up. And there was a couple times I didn't, so it really scared her. But I continued playing football all the way through my high school year, and realized after our last game that I was not going to get a scholarship to football, even though I tried, because I was from a little town called Kermit. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that town, but it's about 45 miles from Odessa, Midland area. So since I was not going to be able to get a scholarship, I thought, well, I'm going to turn to music. That's what I'm going to do. So my senior year, my family moved to Sweetwater, Texas. And my dad got a big promotion, and right in the middle of January the 1st, I left Kermit to go to Sweetwater my last year of high school. And that was kind of devastating. But it was kind of good for me because now I'm able to adapt to any kind of new surroundings. And we started going back to church at that time, but it didn't last long. So by the time I graduated, I was going to church. I was not going to church, and I was getting ready to go for college. Well, my college days were all about exploring, and did I ever. I dated, because I didn't really have a girlfriend in high school, even though I liked girls. I don't know what it was, but I dated several women at once. And for you men to think that's great, I'm telling you, it's not what it's all cracked up to be, especially when you call the woman or the girl by the wrong name. So it wasn't that great. But I didn't care because I was like, I'm exploring. I didn't get to do a lot of this in high school, so I'm going to do it now. And I also went to different churches. I went, and the girls would ask me, they would drag me to church, because basically that's what they were doing. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll go, but I really don't want to, but I like you, but I'll go. So I went to a Catholic church, I went to a Methodist church, I went to a Baptist church, I even went to a Lutheran church, and I even went to a church that spoke in tongues. Now, if you've never been to a church that speaks in tongues, that is very weird. And I told my girlfriend at that time to please never take me back to that church. And she got upset. A couple weeks, we were no longer together. But I didn't care because I was very uncomfortable. I didn't like church anyway. Why would I like a church that's going to speak in tongues? If you're going to speak to me. Don't speak in tongues. So but I did, there was parties, you name it, I did it in college. And there's several things that I can't really mention, I'm not going to get into, but there's a lot of different, there was some trouble that I got into. But again, I was exploring. And I will tell you, I went to a party one Saturday night with a girl who was Catholic, went to a Catholic party. The priest was there, and they were drinking beer. And I thought it was great. Hey, I'm going to drink beer with a pastor or with a priest. It's not the way to look at it, but anyway, I had my fun. And then I changed schools because I was going to Texas Tech. I changed schools from Texas Tech to South Plains College, and I wanted to start taking some music and technical courses. And that's, like I mentioned, that's when I wanted to become a rock star. So you saw my hair as long as it was in one of those pictures. I started letting it grow, and I'm like, well, if I'm going to be a rock star, I got to look like one. So that's what I did. And of course, my dad was still on me about my hair. He's like, why are you letting your hair grow? I was like, Jesus had long hair. Yeah, but Jesus walked everywhere he went. I said, well, yeah. He said, well, you don't walk everywhere. You've got a car. He said, cut your hair. I just ignored it. So, but this school is where I met my first wife. And during this time, some of the groups that you saw up there with the plays and the vocal groups and the ensemble bands, I went crazy because on the weekends I would see my then girlfriend, and during the week while I was going to school, I would be on a bus going to a gig, whether it was with a small ensemble band, with a college band, whatever the case may be. At night, I would go and rehearse for a play, and then at midnight, when that was over, at midnight, I'd get back on the bus and go to wherever we were going to the next day. I'd sleep on the bus half the time, sometimes in a hotel, but my life was filled with basically taking the classes and doing the classes on the road, and then also doing what I love to do, which was traveling and being in the bands. And I thought, this is great. This is what I'm going to be doing. But during the summer breaks, I would work for my dad. And my dad worked at the gas plant, as I mentioned, and I realized that was something I was not going to do. I didn't want to do it because I had to do all the dirty work. And what I couldn't understand was my dad was the main boss. And I would tell him, why am I having to do this? I'm the boss's son. Didn't matter. He said, you're going to do it. He said, if you want to get paid, you're going to do it. So I sucked it up and I did it, but I knew that was not the job I wanted to have. So during that summer, or one of the summers I was working with my dad, I was at a bar, and I met a woman at a bar and picked her up, and she was with some other people, and she said, can they come along? I said, sure. So we went for a drive. At that time, I was in Roswell, New Mexico, and had all these beautiful mountains. Well, something happened. She got upset. She wanted something, and I said, no, we can't do that. And she took the wheel, and she jerked it, and we flipped several times. By the time the car was through flipping, we were about from here to that first microphone there. There was a cliff, straight down. And the highway patrolmen, they were they were surprised. They were like, well, I mean, there wasn't even a scratch on me. Again, God was watching out for me. I didn't realize it, but he will watch out for you even at your worst of times. I believe that, truly believe that. So then I kind of settled down. I graduated and married my first wife shortly afterwards. Now, I say first wife, there's also a second wife, and I've also got a third wife. I have been married 3 times. There's no secret to that. Again, that's not one of my proudest moments. But, you know, sometimes it takes a while to get to the right person. So after I graduated, we got married shortly. So after being married for a short while, I had to get a job because I graduated and I was waiting for my music to kick in, or at least so I thought. So I started working at a supermarket. I started working my way up. And during this time, I started going back to church at a First Methodist. Well, I got tired of that. So again, I just quit going to church. I was only going because my wife was a Methodist and that's what she wanted. So, and I'm like, I'm tired of pleasing all these women for church. I don't want to do this. So I started planning to move to Hollywood, California. And I don't know what got into me, but I felt like, well, that's where the music scene is. This is what I got to do. So I started making plans because I was going to be a musician and an actor because I'd had some experience with plays. And I had these big dreams, but God had a better dream for me or bigger things for me. But I wanted a record deal so bad I would have done anything. And I wanted to go to Hollywood, but it didn't work out. So I was upset. I was mad. I was mad at the whole world. But not once did I ever blame God, because I believed in God, I knew about God, but I never blamed him, because I didn't really allow him in my life to blame. So about after 10 years in the retail industry, I left this job and I went back to school to further my education in Hollywood, Florida, of all places. Not Hollywood, California. And I worked odd jobs while finishing up school until I got a job offer as a board operator at a radio station. Now, that right there was almost a kiss of death. Even though I wanted to be, some way, somehow, I couldn't go to Hollywood, California. I wanted to be in the entertainment business, some way, somehow. So that was my start. And I became Mr. Fill-In at the radio station, too, because people couldn't be there with their shifts. So there were times I would work 24 hours straight and fill in for everybody. Then I got promoted. I got promoted at the radio station, even though I was going to school. I finished up school, got my promotion. And I was just somehow, some way going to get into the music industry or the broadcasting industry. Didn't matter how I did it. So during my radio time, I met a lot of different celebrities, and I thought that was great, man. I met the band Survivor, Air Supply, Ed McMahon. I think everybody knows who Ed McMahon is. Evander Holyfield, Richard Karn. He was the man who played Tim Allen's sidekick on Tool Time. But I got to meet these people, and it was funny because when Ed McMahon came to our radio station, one of the first things he said, because if anybody knows about his life, he drank a lot of alcohol. But he said the first thing he said was when he came into the station, we introduced ourselves. He introduced himself to us. He asked where the liquor bar was. So we took him right to it. But he's a very nice guy. So as time went along, here I am. I was a production assistant. And then at night, I started producing shows on my own time from 6 to midnight every day. I would work at the radio station from 8 to 5, and then 6 to midnight, I would produce shows. I produced anywhere from a 30s and 40s big band show, 50s and 60s rock and roll show, other music shows, except for rap. I didn't care for rap, never have, never will. And parents, I hope you know what your kids are listening to. Rap, and I don't want to offend anybody here, but rap is not music. Rap is not talent. Degrading women, talking about killing police. There is no place in our society for that. And I can't handle that. So hopefully you know what your kids are listening to. But I pretty much became a workaholic. And my personal life started to suffer. And I was also, during that time when I was producing these shows, I was also advised to change my name, which I had a hard time with because I knew my parents wouldn't understand. Until this day, my parents did not know that I had changed my last name for radio purposes. Instead of Steve Brooks, I was Steve Jameson. And I never had the heart to tell them that, so we just left it at that. Unfortunately, they went to their graves not knowing that. But that was a part of me that regretted it, but I went along with it. But there was liquor. I started drinking liquor early in the mornings with the radio station because whatever it took to get the deal signed, get it signed. So I started drinking 10:30 in the morning. I'd drink all the way up until midnight sometimes. I didn't get involved in the drugs because drugs were something that they forbid it in high school. You know, you get caught with drugs, you will not play high school football or any high school sports. So that I stayed away from. But the liquor, the temptation, women throwing themselves all over you. And at the same time, my marriage was suffering. And so one day I just had enough, and I went home and asked for a divorce because it wasn't working. It wasn't working for me anymore. And, when the radio station encourages you to go out and drink to get the deal signed, you're probably working for the wrong radio station. But at that time, I didn't think anything of it, and I thought, okay, that's just, that's normal. And then at the same time, during all this was going on, my brother went to prison. He had been on drugs, on and off on drugs, and my parents had got him out of trouble so many times. Finally, this was the last straw. He held up at Denny's because he was so strung out on drugs, and he wanted my parents to save him because he knew he was going up the river. But they told him there's nothing else we can do. The judge even said, we've tried with you, son, so many times, there's not much we can do for you. So he went to prison. He went to prison for 18 years. And I hated that because we never had the relationship. And so when he got out of prison, we still didn't have that relationship that we should have. And I regret it. In the Bible, in Romans 12:3, it says, "For the grace given me, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment in accordance with the faith God has distributed to each of you." But at this point in my life, it was all about self. I didn't care what verse you could throw at me, and which people did. I didn't care what you could say, what you wanted to do and get me to try to do. I had no interest in Jesus. I thought what I was doing, living the wild lifestyle, drinking, partying, that was all I needed to do. So my first divorce came, and I was really unfazed by it. I don't like admitting that now, but I was unfazed by it. But, you know, I saw a lot of drugs. I saw a lot of booze. The temptation was everywhere. And I just felt like, you know, I need to be alone. I need to be single again. And then I was back on the dating scene again, but I was still partying harder than ever. And I would go home alone, and it was just me and my cat. I had a cat, kept me company. And then I met my second wife, and we started to settle down again, and I continued at the radio station, but at that time, I got promoted to director of operations for the AM station. So I was exhausted, and I was just ready to rest. I had been partying too hard for 8, 9, 10 years. It was just solid party, night after night after night after night. And even on Saturday nights, I had a gig with one of my 50s and 60s rock band hosts. I was his sound person, and I was just never home. So that's why my marriage had suffered. But I thought I was where I needed to be. So I was exhausted. I was trying to rest up. And then I left the radio station, and I took a job offer for a spring football league. And that didn't play out. That lasted about 6 weeks, and we were getting ready to have the opening season, the first game of the season, and I never got paid. So that was an eye-opener. But I had made pretty good money at the station, so I was okay, but I still had to get a job. So I got married again, and at this time I was working for an employment labor industry, but I still wasn't happy. I was tired of Florida, so I started looking around and went back to Texas because I'm originally from Texas. I'm a Texas boy. So I got a job with a Fox TV station after I came back to Texas. There's a station in Abilene, and this is where my new journey begins. And at that time, my second wife, she didn't want to come. Then she said, no, I'll go. Then she didn't want to move. Oh, I'll move. And then finally she did move. But she was there for about 6 weeks after we moved to Texas, and I was getting settled in, and it was strange because she left me because she didn't like Texas. She was too used to Florida and Philadelphia. So she left. I came home one day. I turned put the key into the door, and it had a real hollow sound. I'm like, I think we just got robbed. And what it was, she had taken everything that I had. I was so broke. I was so down. I was nearly licking the curb. That's how bad it was. But the good thing is, I stayed with the TV station for a while, and it came Christmas time, and we had a Christmas party. And I wasn't going to go, and my manager, my boss, convinced me to go, and I'm glad I did, because Martha was single. That's where I met Martha, at the TV station. She was working on the other side, the PAX TV station. And so we started kind of talking, and she found out that in the meantime, I had gotten a divorce. She had no idea. I had no idea she was single. And then New Year's came, and we went on a date, kind of a date. We went on I guess a little, what would you call it? A movie night with our manager, with our boss, and his wife. And I didn't want to go. Then I found out she was going. I thought, well, I guess that wouldn't be too bad. And that's where it started. Martha and I started dating after that, because we had a long night that night on New Year's night. We talked a lot. I didn't know anything about her religion past, or about her religion, that she went to church or anything like that. That never came up for a while. But now, if anyone knows my wife, they know that I have basically married out my league. Because when she met me, yes, I would come to the TV station in dress pants, a shirt, and a dyke and a tie, but I was wearing a dyke coat jacket. And she was thinking, well, what's wrong with this guy? But she taught me a lot about fashion. So because of her today, I know a lot more about fashion than I did back then. And back then, I didn't even care. So we had started dating. We started really liking each other. And then she came out and asked that question that I always dreaded. And she asked me one day, would I like to go to church with her? And my first thing I wanted to do was run. Because my experiences with churches were not good. So I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm really liking this lady. Well, I guess I could give it a try. But so I agreed to do it, and I did not. I almost backed out. But here's the funny thing about